Hi, my name is James Delano, founder of Everyday Climate Change on Instagram. Welcome to Everyday Climate Change Interviews, where I talk to climate change photographers, environmentalists, and artists. Today it is a pleasure to introduce Elisabetta Zavoli. Elisabetta holds a degree in environmental sciences, which gives her a different perspective than most photographers. Before living in Indonesia for 6 years, she lived in North Africa, giving her a more global perspective on the climate crisis. Today she will share a series on commercial shrimp farming in Indonesia and the damage that it does to the mangrove forests. The mangrove forests cover a very small portion of the Earth's surface, but they are a massive natural carbon sink. It also comments on how our consumption choices affect people on the other side of the planet. If you like what you're seeing, please hit the subscribe button at the bottom right, and I'd like to hand it over to Elisabetta Zavoli.
Thank you, James, for inviting me to join Everyday Climate Change interview. And my name is Elisabetta Zavoli, and I'm an Italian documentary photographer. The work I'm going to present today, it's a documentary project on an environmental issue that I have shot over a span of 5 years in Indonesia. My two great passions in life have always been the environment, the caring and the understanding of the environment, and photography. And I started my life by investing in my education. I graduated in environmental sciences, and I started to work as a chemist in a chemical laboratory for 8 years in Italy. Basically, we did everyday routine analysis on wastes of different kinds to treat them in the correct way. But at a certain point, I decided that job was not meant to me, because it was every day inside a chemical laboratory and every day playing routine analysis. And since I take pictures from a very early age, I mean always, as I remember, I decided that I wanted to try to use photography to investigate the world and to make this as a job for my life. And so after these 8 years, I quit my job, and I was lucky or good enough, depending on the point of view, to be selected by the first photojournalism masterclass in Italy, run by Contrasto Agency in Milan. It was 2009. And since then, I started my career as a photojournalist and documentary photographer. And I started by living abroad. So since 2009 until 2018, I've been living before in North Africa, in Algeria, and for 6 years in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, I did the most and the most deepest investigations on environmental issues. So now I can say that I do a job that merges together my passion and my knowledge of the environment and the use of photography as a way to express myself and to tell these stories in a visual capacity. So I will start to tell you a little bit about this project, which is called A Fistful of Shrimps, and it's about the deforestation of mangroves ecosystems in Indonesia, driven by the Western hunger for cheap tropical shrimps. With Western hunger, I mean mostly the three biggest fish markets of the world, which are European market, the USA market, and Japan. And Japan has us in a third place. And as soon as I arrived in Jakarta in 2012, I knew that I wanted to investigate, to start working on issues related to forests, since it's the environment that I like the most. And Indonesia actually has a lot of topics and issues related to its forests. One of the most famous is the depletion of tropical forests for palm oil exploitation, but it was already been thoroughly and deeply covered by many excellent colleagues of mine. So I was really researching and reading the local newspapers, and in these local newspapers I got through an article about the blue carbon ecosystems, and I said to myself, what is a blue carbon ecosystems? And I took back again my university books. And yeah, actually I have also studied the blue carbon ecosystems, which are all the 3-4 particular kind of ecosystems, really powerful and excellent in storing a huge quantity of carbon, because they are ecosystems connected to the sea. So basically they are mangroves forests, the tidal or coastal swamps, and the seagrass. And all these kind of ecosystems have this great capacity, huge capacity of extracting the CO2 from the atmosphere and storage and bury the CO2 inside the land. I mean, especially in the root apparatus and under the soil. And they are very efficient in doing so. So, for example, mangroves are only 0.4% of the global forest in the world. So mangroves occupy only the 0.4% of the total extension of forests, but they can contribute to a 10 to 15% in terms of carbon storage. So if we, for example, if we cut all the mangroves of the forest, of the earth, we will release in the atmosphere 15% of the total concentration of greenhouse gases. The opposite is that they can keep this 15% in their root apparatus and under the soil if they are, of course, protected and still living. So I soon understood the very importance of this special ecosystem, and I started by asking to myself why they are so cut down, why they are so deforested in Indonesia, because that article was actually telling that in the last 30 years already half of the mangroves forest of Indonesia have been cut down. And if we think that Indonesia, which is a huge archipelago of more than 17,000 islands in the tropic belt, so Indonesia alone hosts 1/4, 25% of the whole mangroves of the world. So it's a huge quantity, and it's the place where the deforestation of mangroves has the highest rate, comparing to all the other countries of the tropics belt. And I started my research, my investigation from this point, and I discovered that the first reason for the depletion of mangroves were the shrimps aquaculture. So I took a contact with the local NGO, Wetland International Indonesia Program, which specifically works for the restoration of mangroves and for the blue carbon ecosystems in Indonesia. And I asked them if I could start taking pictures and visiting sites where they promote the restoration of this forest. And by chance, one of these sites was actually very close to Jakarta, where I was living. So I started to go to this village of fishermen every month and stayed there for 3-4 days. And that was for 4 years. Then the following until 2016, and then I have won a journalism grant to cover the expenses to produce an in-depth investigation on this topic. So I was able to visit more sites on Java Island, which is the island most affected by the deforestation of mangroves. Up to 70% of mangroves on Java Island have already been cut down. And so I could take pictures and find more nuances in this story, relating to the coastal protections, the local economy, the global economy, and how local communities are the best to find solutions that can work both for the environment and for the people. So this is one of my favorite picture of this project, because it really convey the idea of the main idea of the connection between the aquaculture and the livelihood of fishermen in Indonesia with the mangroves forest. If I wanted to give this picture a kind of title, can be the marriage, an impossible marriage or a possible marriage, because the fishing net hanging from a mangrove tree of the species Rhizophora stylosa is called jala, and jala, it's in local Bahasa language, it's the throwing fishing net, very typical of the fishing technique of Southeast Asian countries. And it's the net with which fishermen catch both shrimps and fish in the sea or in their ponds. And it's the main reason for the cutting of mangroves, as we said, because since the 80s, the government of Indonesia pushed for pushing the local economy, started a campaign of promoting the deforestation of mangroves to make room for aquaculture ponds called tambak. So people were encouraged to cut the forest and to excavate the soil to make these ponds of brackish water, so water mixing up the sea water and the river waters. And there are different a variety of aquaculture field in Indonesia. So there are extensive fields, very intensive field, industrial fields, and all of these variety have impacts on the environment. So this picture symbolizes this interdependence between the local livelihood of fishermen and the people, because fish proteins are the main proteins for the people in Indonesia and in Southeast Asia, and the presence of the forest. These are two fishermen sorting the shrimps they have catch in their ponds at night. Actually was just before dawn, because they catch the shrimps by placing a trap inside the main sluice of their pond. And these fishermen are brother. The one with the head torch is the leader of a community of 11 families who joined the program of restoration of Wetland International. So basically the NGO supported the restoration of the mangroves on the banks of the ponds of these fishermen, and the changing of their managing of the ponds from an unsustainable way to a sustainable way. Because what happens when you cut the forest from a place, when you cut the mangroves from a place, that you expose the soil to the climate, and you lose the capacity of mangroves to give oxygen and nutrients to the water and to the life, to the whole ecosystem that mangroves support. So in the ponds without the forest around, the water becomes very poor in oxygen, the temperature rises, no nutrients, so fishermen needs to add chemicals and feed the shrimps in order to maintain and to maintain their life and to grow until size market. So basically fishermen gets in debt to buy these chemicals. They become slave of the chemical industry and the slave of a global economy of all the chemicals needed to run farm and aquaculture. But thanks to this project, the fishermen, when they signed the contract with the NGO, they promised to stop using chemicals, and they have been supported by the NGO for the few years in which the restored forest needs to come back again to be supportive for life. So the first 3-4 years the trees were still too young to fully support an ecosystem, and they had so meager catch that they need the support of the NGO. By passing the time and the mangroves become bigger and bigger and the forests come back again and can support back again the life in the ponds, the fishermen became totally independent from any chemical, independent from the NGO. They now live on their own business, thanks to the forest that can support the life of shrimps and fish in the ponds. The life of fishermen, basically, it's a nightlife for two main reasons. The first one is the climate. During daytime, living and working on a bare land without a forest in a tropical country, it's really very hard, as you can imagine, because the sunlight is very strong and temperatures are high, above 30 degrees, and the humidity is huge. So at night, at least, you don't have so much insolation. I mean, you don't have the sunlight. And so it's better to work at night, and they also place their traps at night and needs to spend the night at the pond to look after the trap, because there are many thefts of shrimps among people of the same village. So they need really to look after their trap for not losing the daily catch. This is another really weird but also emblematic situation. This man was inside one of his pond. The pond are really shallow ponds, so water is up to 1 meter or so, and he was distributing a chemical called samponen in excess. Samponen is basically a molluscicide, so to kill the competitors of shrimps if used in the correct concentration. But this fisherman discovered, or someone told them, that if they use samponen in excess, they could easily kill the fish in the ponds. So they started to use this technique when the fish in the ponds reach the market size, and they should have to take the fish out by fishing with the throwing net, so expending a lot of energy under the sun. But instead they discovered this technique of killing the fish with a chemical, so all the fish come up to the surface dead, and they just catch it by picking them up without any effort. And then they are ready to sell the fish fresh, let's say fresh, at the local market in the morning. And when I ask one of these fishermen at night, aren't you afraid of eating a fish that has been poisoned? And he answered quite clearly, frankly and directly, well, the fish eat the chemical. I eat the fish, meaning that I don't eat the chemical, I eat the fish. So they don't realize that anything that they give to the fish eventually passes inside the human body. And after this treatment, the pond is sterile for at least 4 months, so nothing can grow again. So when they use this technique to catch the fish, they use in shift in different ponds. So they keep continuing the catch, alternating the ponds. And these are some of the fish caught dead from the surface of the water. This is a graphical representation of the extension of mangroves and how they are important in extracting the greenhouse gases from the atmosphere, as I said before. And this is another graphical representation of the rate of deforestation of mangroves. So globally, in the last 50 years, already half of the global coverage of mangroves have been lost. Basically, mostly due to aquaculture and shrimps industry, because mangroves are exactly in the same place where brackish water ponds for aquaculture needs to be excavated and produced. But also mangroves can be cut for making room to palm oil plantations, or in new urbanization like ports, portal area, and so on. This is a view of the coastline of Sawaluhur, the village where I went for 4 years to document the restoration of mangroves. And I discovered myself as a photographer that I really enjoy the low lights, because I was forced to shoot mostly at night, sunset or sunrise. And this is the red lights are from a head torch of a fisherman enlightening the sea arriving to the coast, while in front of us there's and in the background there are the shadows of the only piece of mangroves forest remaining in front of the village, which is a protected area because of a birding nest site. And at the back, the yellow light is that of the village. This is another picture that I wanted to shoot exactly as you see. The reddish or pinkish light. It's night. It's nighttime, and it's a full moon night. But that particular color, it's because it's because the astronomy event was particular. It was a blood moon, a full blood moon night. So the color of the moon was really reddish, had this red nuance. And I remember that I check every year when the blood moon will happen, and I made my travel to the village in that period, because this reddish color, taking pictures of the ponds area, which is really a bare lands, under this reddish color help me convey a feeling of weirdness, a dystopian view of the place. And that was one of the few remaining standing mangrove tree for kilometers and kilometers of this bare land. This is a symbol of the life I mean the dead life because of the lack of the ecosystem, the support from the mangroves ecosystem. This is a water snake, and the fishermen killed it. It is very common for fishermen to find the water snakes in their trap in the morning, but they just killed the snake, and the land is completely cracked because of the sun hitting the land without any shadow from the tree. This is the aspect of the land and how it works. It's basically a bare land made out of many ponds, all connected each other and to the main canal by this smaller canal, and every pond has an entry point, which is as Lewis, which is the place where this fisherman is standing. It works kind of a lung. So when we inspire, we push the air inside our lung, and the tides, the sea tides, push when it grows. It let the seawater entering the canal systems and mixing up with the fresh water coming from the river. And this is an aerial view of the coastal valley of Sawaluhur with the shrimps and the aquaculture ponds. As you can see, it's a huge area deforested. Once it was fully covered in mangroves forest. And what we have just seen, so the ponds for kilometers and kilometers were excavated by people by hand, because there's no mechanical help for doing this job. So they really dug the canals and the ponds by scooping the mud with bamboo scoops or really by hand. And they needed to dredge continuously all the canals and the ponds to keep this shallowness, this meter of water for the shrimps and the fish to grow. This is how it appears, a pond's bank cracked under the sun. And this laudan is one of the chemical the fishermen who manage the ponds in an intensive way, use for feeding their shrimps. This is the fisherman that answered me, "Oh, I just eat the fish. I don't eat the chemical," of the story I told you before.
I expected him to be older.
Yeah, no, he's very young. He was like 25 or 27, maybe 27 now. It was 25 at the time. And this is another graphical elaboration about the aquaculture production in the world. So basically we have lost 50% of mangroves in the last 50 years, because in the last 50 years, and especially in the last 30 years, aquaculture in general has a way to grow fish protein, had a very, very high rate of growing. I mean, it boomed. yes, it boomed because of the unsustainability of the of the fishery in the sea, the fishing of the wild fish in the sea, that causes the fish stocks in the oceans to shrink a lot. So we were extracting more fish from the oceans of the earth than the fish that can be replaced or grow back again. And people needs more and more proteins. So the aquaculture seemed to be a good solution, at least an answer to this need. But instead, it is starting to create another unbalance in some other ecosystems of the world, as we can see with the example of the shrimps. So the growing of the shrimps aquaculture, as you can see from the diagram, skyrocketed, and that if we think that, for example, in my country, so in Europe, let's say in Italy, in Europe, until 30 years ago, shrimps were really a special meal. We just eat them at Christmas time. But now you can find shrimps every day in every supermarket at any time. So shrimps became a commodity, and they became a commodity thanks to the tropical shrimps. And that was because the tropical shrimps can grow all year long, while the shrimps we used to eat at our latitude, the temperate belt, were just seasonal shrimps. So the catch was just in the, if I remember, it was November, October, and then done. But the great production of tropical shrimps at a cheaper price, because they come to Europe and cost less than the local shrimps of the Mediterranean, for example. And the cheaper price is because the labor in Indonesia is much, much cheaper than any worker in Europe, and because there are no regulations on sustainability, on environmental sustainability. So it's this opened the European market to the tropical shrimps. And actually this was also one aspect that with our investigation me and the colleague Jacopo Pasotti showed to the people that the European Union in a sort of way has a double standard about the goods European Union imports in its territories. Because if, for example, from a fishery point of view, the fishermen and the fishing in European seas is strictly regulated, have to follow rules of sustainability, the labor costs at a minimum wage, and so on and so on. So the price of the fish catch in this way is very high for good reason. But at the same time, European Union leave goods at a lower price coming from, for example, countries like Indonesia, Southeast Asia, without any check on the sustainability of the practice of growing these shrimps, and without any check
about the labor cost, and so on. So
it is terrible. I noticed in Japan with all of my work on logging, when they cut down trees in Japan, they immediately replant.
it should be done. Yeah.
But when they would cut down in Indonesia or Malaysia, they just let them do what they wanted to. So there is this
Exactly.
north versus south double standard, as you said.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we are responsible of this. If we don't say anything, we are co-responsible of this double set. So it's important really that people know about this situation, that our readers, they need to know, they deserve to know. And so this is another picture showing how they take out the shrimp, the shrimps trap in the morning, and shrimps are catch inside. And this is the two other two fishermen joining the restoration program, walking through one of the mangroves forest bordering their ponds. And this is another picture of the fishing hut of Rudin, the fisherman, the leader of the group of fisherman families joining the program. And he was the one, his family was the family where I used to spend my time at the fisherman village. So they host me every time I go there. And I lived with them for the few days of the shooting. The fishing hut are also places where they pray. So most of their life is really connected with the fishing hut, with the fishing ponds. It's deeply connected. I mean, every aspect of their life and the ponds.
So this picture is a wall with a wall of pictures from the family who hosts me when I go to visit the Sawaluhur village. And that was actually the first home where I was hosted, because as I said before, once the forest of mangroves grow bigger and flourish enough to sustain the ecosystem back again, the fishermen really are independent in their livelihood, and they start to make a living, a very wealthy living. And so this fisherman, Rudin, was able to build his own new home in bricks and leave this home in wood because of the improving in his livelihood due to the restoration. And this is new home. His wife with the green t-shirt, one of his son seated on the floor, and a neighbor visiting. And they were very, very happy, because they, you know, when you have your own life in your hands, it's really, really important that you are able to sustain your life, the education of your sons. And this is due because the restoration of the ecosystem enabled the fishermen to be independent. And in the contract with the NGO, they also have to pick up the seeds from the mangroves trees and create a nursery, so grow more plants to sell to other sites in Java or in Sumatra or in other places of Indonesia that need to restore their forest. So this is, for example, Timan going around with the box and collecting the propagules, which are the kind of seeds from Rhizophora stylosa, this one. Actually, this seed is incredible. Has the shape of I don't know, of a needle. Needle. And it just naturally just when it fall down, the shape is able to place it vertically inside the mud, so the plant can start growing immediately. It's
so like kind of like an arrow.
Like an arrow, exactly. And this is another fisherman of the community of the restoration that is who is actually planting the propagules on the banks in his pond. This is how they catch the shrimps and fish in the ponds, bordered with the mangroves forest back again. As you can see, the roots of the mangroves go inside the ponds, so this gives room for larvae, for the small creatures before becoming the market size, and at the same time give oxygen to the water, give shadows. So the benefits are very, very important. And this is the daily life of the fishermen. So basically they commute between the village and the ponds by walking or by bike. They basically go back home just for having meal with the family, and they go back again to the ponds because there's always many works to do. This man was, because unfortunately died a few years ago, was the ranger of the village, so the person that protected the park, the natural reserve area, the one I told you before, which is a birding nest area for migratory birds. And he was, when he retired from being a ranger, he joined the community of restoration and started restore the mangroves also on his ponds. This is what remains of the pristine mangroves forest in front of Sawaluhur in the park area, in the natural reserve area. And the small white dot are all birds, migratory birds like herons or other kind. This is completely in a different part of Java Island. The pictures we've seen until now are from Sawaluhur, which is in Banten province, so west of Jakarta. But this place is in central Java, so close to Semarang. The province is Kendal, and it's a place same. It was a place same as the coastal valley of Sawaluhur, so it was a bare land of aquaculture ponds, but as you can see from the picture, all is gone because of a huge flooding. And these events are so common now in Indonesia, especially in area not protected anymore by the forest, because mangroves forest have this fundamental give this fundamental protection to coastline against the rising of sea level, against the tidal floods, and against the sea currents erosion. But without mangroves, the land is has no protection, and this is what is happening. Here, the picture here is in Bedono. Bedono, and this is the portico of a mosque, the only building in bricks of the village of Bedono, who was abandoned 10 years ago because of completely flooded by the water. So Bedono has the same history of many sites in Indonesia. They cut the mangroves, they make a lot of ponds, and after few years the rising of sea level and tidal flooding flooded the place, and the people needs to abandon their home and go to live in another place. This is the only villager left living in Bedono. It's actually, she's a woman, Pasija, and she never accepted to move. She wants to stay there because it's her home, and she just made her home in higher than the water, like a silt home, and she works as a fish dealer, a fish collector. So she collected the catch of fish and shrimps from many fishermen, and then she goes to the market to sell this fish. I mean, she's an example of adaptation, a strong adaptation to a situation that has changed a lot because of many reasons: climate change and cutting of mangroves and so on. And this is the mangroves forest in Bedono right now, because the curious thing is that when people left their homes to go and living somewhere else, because already the ponds were all flooded, their homes were in wood, and they collapsed, and they became the substrate for the forest to grow back again. So now if you go inside the forest, which this forest has 10 years of age, because Bedono was abandoned 10 years ago, and if you walk inside this forest, you can still see some pieces of wood belonging to the previous homes, now buried in the mud and becoming a new substrate for the forest. So the forest in this place is naturally coming back and naturally restoring itself back again. These are pictures of a different village, same story. This is the village of Mangunarjo, so mangroves have been cut down, but in this case the ponds have been flooded by a huge sea current erosion, a huge event that happened during one night. If I remember very well, more than 150 hectares of ponds completely flooded in one night. The villagers left lose everything of their livelihood, and they couldn't do anything, and they were really really sad and really uncertain about their future. But one person of this village, who have already known the importance of keeping the mangroves, said to all the other ones, let's start planting mangroves back again, because otherwise we have to abandon our homes and moved to another place. And that was the starting of a restoration project, but locally born, because of the idea of a local fisherman who has lost everything. And this woman, Nur Chayati, is his wife, and she also, with really an entrepreneurial attitude, started a group of 13 women to produce batik, so the traditional clothes, the traditional induments of Indonesia. We dyed with natural dyes from mangroves trees, and they started to discover back again how many uses people can get from mangroves. Natural dyes, ingredients for food, ingredients for medicines. So the restoration of mangroves not only is important for the livelihood of fishermen, but also it's good to empower the independence of women in the local villages, the economic independence of women. She was collecting these seeds from another kind of mangroves to make a cake. And this is one moment of the producing of batik. So this is liquid wax they used to draw on the piece of cloth, and then they will dye the cloths in the natural dyes. But the natural dyes didn't catch where the wax is. So by washing the wax, they get the drawings on the piece of cloth. And this is my last story. This village is the village of Tapak. Here mangroves have never been cut down because the elderly of the village opposed to the government plan. They knew the importance of the mangroves, and they didn't want to join this program. So how they can live, how they could live? They found a solution of integrated forest and aquaculture. Basically, it's what the restoration project is contribute to reach. But in this case, the village started from this situation. So they dig ponds, but without never cutting mangroves on the pond banks. So they keep the forest, and they make their ponds among the forest. So they never started using chemicals. They always have the shrimps and fish enough to sustain their life. And this today, this attitude, this choice is supported and supported by this young generation of villager who established an association to improve the knowledge about the mangroves and to talk with policymakers and to anybody to support the idea that mangroves needs to be protected. This is Professor Murdiarso. I put a picture of him because he's the world leader. He's the senior scientist of CIFOR, so the Center of the International Center of Research in Forestry, that has its headquarters in Indonesia, in Java, very close to Jakarta, and he's the leader scientist, the most expert in mangroves in the world. He's Indonesian, and he was our scientific reference for the project, explaining us all the characteristics of the mangroves and so on. And we asked him one question at the end of all our investigation, but how much cost one cocktail of shrimps that we can eat in Milan or in Europe in terms of carbon to the world? And he made just a quick estimation. It's an estimation, but I trust him. And its estimation said that more or less 100 grams of shrimps, tropical shrimps, that we can have in a cocktail, have costed 1,000 tons of CO2, the emission of 1,000 tons of CO2 in the atmosphere for producing those 100 grams of shrimps, without any calculation on the ship packaging and shipping to arrive to our countries.
And these are the two symbolic hands, two fistful of shrimps. These shrimps are the same species. This is the white leg shrimps, or Peneus vanamei, the most common shrimps grown in Southeast Asia, in Indonesia. The same shrimps cooked in Milan. And these are quite a few species of shrimps that I took pictures of. The three at the center line are the tropical shrimps from Indonesia, but from the Southeast Asia in general. So the very center is still the white leg shrimps. At his left is the tiger shrimps, and at its right it's the fire shrimps. And the other ones are all Mediterranean shrimps, aside from the top center, which is the shrimp coming from wild catch in front of Argentina. That is very common on European market.
Let me ask you some questions about this. I hardly know where to start, because it talks about all of the multi-tiered issues, one being the particular fragility of the tropical environments, and also the north versus south, how our consumption affects the lives of people on the other side of the planet. I mean, and this is so ambiguous, because at first it seems like a great opportunity to earn money, but it brings utter destruction if people are not careful. I mean, it reminds me of tuna in Japan, the maguro they call it, because it used to be the food of the very rich, and it was a fairly rare occasion that you ate tuna, and then all of a sudden it became common. And likewise, our tempura is full of non-Japanese shrimp. So yeah, I mean, it's incredible. So I'd like to actually go back and circle back to this point, but first ask, how did you end up in Indonesia from Italia?
I was already living abroad, and Indonesia, I moved there with my family, and Indonesia seemed to be really, from my point of view, the right place because it's a country very important for the world right now, more and more important, because some of the bigger issues, especially related to the environment and the climate change, comes from that part of the world. And because also we have more and more economical and political connections with them. I mean, always we European, and we have more and more connections with Indonesia, with that country. For example, so I thought that it was the right place to be in that moment, and I knew that from a journalistic point of view, the hub of that area was Bangkok. The main newspapers and magazines of international coverage were based in Bangkok. There was almost nobody in Jakarta, aside a few crew. But that has been for me kind of, that was great for me, because I could start from scratch, and I could be in the right place if some assignments also came out. And actually that was it. I had the possibility to work on long-term documentary projects like this one for myself. I mean, because I decided to do, and I work on assignments for other topics for other magazines or newspapers. And I remember I was we were really quite few expat, foreign photographers over there, and I was the only female foreign photographer based in Jakarta. So for me, have been from a job point of view really a great occasion.
Great. You share something with Sebastião Salgado. I believe he was an economist before photographer, and it seems to infuse his work with a certain informed point of view, how things interact globally as far as his environmental issues. How do you think that influences your work?
Okay, thank you for comparing me to Salgado, because I apologize to Salgado. He is too much. No, I mean, I can say that I share with him this aspect, the thing that we have an educational background that probably affected our photography in a way. From my background, I don't have an economic background, but an environmental sciences background. And actually, environmental sciences, it's the study of the environment from different subjects. So let's say we had exams of biology, ecology, physics, chemistry, mathematics, geology, whatever. Because we human beings are today are used to separate knowledge into boxes, right? You are an expert in geology, you are a geologist. You are an expert in chemistry, you are a chemist. And those boxes are really, really accurate, and the knowledge in those boxes is really deep, has reached a very deep point. But most of the time we lose the big picture, the thing that connects all these boxes together, which is the ecosystem. Nature is not only chemistry, is not only biology, everything is connected and interact. And we of environmental sciences have this understanding of nature in this way, kind of an holistic way. So we know the basic of geology, the basic of biology, of chemistry, of ecology, to be able to understand the ecosystem. And I think that this aspect is deeply also present in my work, my photographic work, because I tend to really find and want to investigate all the nuances, all the connections of an environmental issues to the other aspects of life at the bottom, at the local scale, and at the global scale, because everything is connected. It's to simplify too much complexity. It's really dangerous. And this is what is also happening when dealing with the climate change issues. Climate change is a complex subject. It's really a complex subject. It's everywhere in time and space, and it's been affecting every aspect of life, even if we don't realize.
You know, we're talking about climate change is infinitely complex, and media tends to be, constantly, one of the things that's been kind of reinforced through my own experience over and over again is that I have to boil a complex issue or focus on a little piece of it, or else, frankly, it's going to be hard to communicate, and maybe even the story won't run at all, and we want to tell these stories. So can you talk a little bit about your thinking when you were producing this story? I mean, in an exhibition, you can get granular about information, but on a magazine, for example, it's a bit more difficult.
Yeah, I completely understand you. Actually, I think that magazines, any kind of magazines all over the world, need to have the courage, much more and more courage, to publish issues and projects created with this complexity. I try to push and to work in this way, because I think, as I said before, we need to give the reader a taste of complexity, of the complexity. They deserve it. Otherwise, people remains without the correct knowledge, and comes out bias and fake news and whatever. And it is very hard to have, for example, to find publications for projects so long and so nuanced. But anyway, we must try. And for example, one of the biggest obstacles that I found for the production of a project like this was at the end the money to support really the production, because I was living in Indonesia and I could shoot pictures, take pictures of the site close to Jakarta, because it was not so much expensive for me to go there, and I did it for 4 years. So I had a base of a base of photography to work on. But for the whole production of this project, of this investigative project, so this means visiting other sites, interviewing. We have interviewed the really powerful Ministry of Fishery in Indonesia, and scientists and many people. It takes time, it takes a lot of expenses. And without a support from someone, it's so hard to do. And magazines don't support. I mean, quite really few magazines can support a project so extended, so extensive. And we were lucky to won this journalism grant from the European Journalism Center, which support independent journalism of investigation on different topics. And thanks to them, we could able to produce this story. And then we published not the whole thing, but like chapters or specific angles for specific magazines.
That's smart, actually. Quite smart. This is actually a good way to kind of transition into Radar, or do you say Radar magazine? But before, yeah, I mean, this is the thing I think that plaguing all of journalism, and I'm kind of glad you brought it up, because it is a subject I think people need to understand more, is that just how, even if you live in Jakarta, even if you live in Java, which is a fairly cheap place to live and travel, journalism isn't cheap. And it takes time and it takes funding to do it. And these subjects are important. And if we don't do it well, or we can't do it well, this is where COVID comes in. Our air travel is more expensive. We have quarantines on the way back. Quarantines, sometimes you have to pay for the hotel. Luckily here in Japan you don't. But all of Asia is closed right now. Every international travel, except for maybe Nepal, maybe Thailand soon, and Bangladesh, is an ocean or a continent away, and that affects journalists in Japan, just like Italia is quite expensive to get around. So we're neglecting the issues that need to be talked about. Now, getting back to Radar magazine, so this was in the works for a while, and you came together with colleagues. Can you talk a little bit about the basis that drove you all to come together and do this important project?
The basis were most the reasons I told you before, that we we had enough of publications inaccurate and too much simplified, and not giving a deep understanding of topics or projects. So we decided that I'm talking about, especially in this case, of the media landscape in Italy. So we decided that we, in first person, wanted to read something different. We wanted to see, to understand the issues in a deeper way. So we came together with the same needs and the same ideas. almost luckily. I mean, we are 8 people, and the first 3 were just talking together, complaining again of the media landscape in Italy. And then they said, why don't we open and run a media with this and this and these characteristics? And so they started to contact other people that they thought could agree, or actually could have the same view on this topic. And they contacted my colleague Jacopo Pasotti, and he contacted me, and we found among us 8 people really on the same wavelength, with different expertise. Me and Jacopo are the older ones, and with the more international reporting experience. The other ones are younger than us and more specialized on Italian local issues, but also with a view of the global scale. And we really started out of enthusiasm. It was nothing related to we want to become the most famous or no, we just started thinking that we want to do a good job. We want to do a deep and in-depth journalism. We want to tell the stories. We want to tell a lot of stories connected to the climate change, because of course we recognize that it's the biggest issue of our time and affects every aspect of life. And we want also to give more attention to the local environmental problems in Italy, because most of the time they are just treated too much locally or even nothing. But they depends on political choices and also on economical situations of some places than in others. And so we started like this, and we decided to ask few friends, journalists and photojournalists and photographers, and help for the first few months before our crowdfunding, because at the beginning, since we are all 8 of us, we are freelancers, we couldn't have means to pay for the articles. So a lot of people helped us to run the first 4 months of Radar. And then we opened this crowdfunding, and thanks to our audience that we had already a good base of audience, we could make a few more money to start running the magazine in the correct way. I mean, paying fees to the contributors, and but we don't do just this. We produce also. We are involved also in communications projects for universities and for NGOs, always related to the environment. And these projects of communication, we we do by ourselves, because we have the skills to do this project, and part of the fees go to Radar to support the running of the magazine. So it's kind of always floating on the surface, but still floating. Yeah, takes time to establish.
I think it's a courageous effort, and it's fantastic. I'll put a link to the magazine on this website so people can check it out. No, it's fantastic work. I'd like to talk for...
and sorry if I interrupt you, but we will have the English edition, the international edition, starting from January.
Fantastic. And also, just for people who don't speak Italian, please remember that you can use Google Translate. The technology is there. It's quite easy to get a good translation, and translation from Italian to English is quite good. But anyway, it's a courageous effort. It's amazing. As I mentioned, I'd like to talk more, but probably should wrap it up now. I think that this is a fantastic, optimistic project, and I love as I said, the way your intimate style finds its way into reportage, and I just think it's fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me, and I love your work and I like what you're doing, so please continue to do it, Elisabetta.
Thank you so much, James, for everything, for inviting me, and above all for creating this community around the climate change issue, because it was so courageous also from your side to create this community of all of us from around the world. Thank you so much.